my name is Kim Min-tae and I'm gonna give you a tour of a very spooky place today. Can you guess where that is? To give you a hint, please look at the photo I'm showing you. Can you guess? It looks like kind of like a school or kind of like a church, maybe. But this place is actually a prison. You might be thinking, why on earth would I be giving you a tour of a prison? What else is there to see but just jails and jailers? However, this is no ordinary prison. This prison actually used to be a prison back in the past, but now it's being used as a museum. This is the Seodaemun prison. You might wonder, why on earth would Koreans want to make a prison into a museum? It doesn't really look all that nice either. However, this prison was made into a museum to let us commemorate the people who died in here for fighting for our independence. This prison was actually used to imprison people who fought against the Japanese in the Japanese invasion. So most of the people who died in here were people who fought viciously for our independence, and that means we should commemorate them and make their death precious. And before I go on and go explaining some other points I'd like to explain, let me give you a few heads up about the pictures I'm gonna use. Some of the pictures, nearly half of the pictures I've took them myself, but some pictures I didn't have the chance or couldn't find the right spot to take them, so I had to use a few photos from the internet, and I also pasted the links on the photos themselves. So if you're interested in looking at the photos that I downloaded from the internet, you can always go on the link and look at it for yourself. So let me give you a picture of what it actually looks like from the inside of the jails. The small round thing that you see is what it looks like from the inside when you look at the long stick. And the second thing is the kind of large thing. The second thing is the rectangle used to spy on jailers. If you see on the slits to spy, you can see that the opening goes shorter and shorter and finally ends up very small. So from this mechanism, the janitors could spy on the jailers and what they were doing. They could have a field view of the room. But the jailers could not actually see when the janitors were spying on them or not, because the slits were too small for seeing, and there was the thick wall protecting it. So the jailers always had to censor their moves and motives once they were inside the jails, because they didn't know when they would be spied on. Also, the second thing, this round thing you see, was used to report if someone was really sick or something bad was happening inside. If you put your finger through that round hole, it pushes the stick that I just showed you. So the stick goes down. The stick goes down, and the janitor would know immediately if there was a fight or someone was sick and that they needed to go there. This is the picture of the jail cells itself. So if you push open the door, this is the first thing you'd see. If you see here, you can see it's really, really tiny, because, well, you might be thinking, well, that's not that tiny, but you have to know that nearly 15 people are staying here, and they didn't even have room to all lie down when they were sleeping, so they had to take turns and stand up during the night. It wasn't actually the best place for staying. Yeah, the reason they had to do this was that they didn't expect so many jailers to come here, but once they started putting people in there, they kept coming on and on and on, and the cell numbers were too tiny compared to the jailer numbers, so they had to put in more than they expected. So this is a picture of another jail room. Unlike the picture I just showed you, this jail room is really tiny. So you might be thinking that this is kind of like a new torture. Put 5 or 10 people in this tiny jail room and make them live there, but actually it wasn't like that. This jail room was for one person only. Yeah. So as I told you before, Southern Prison was a place for people who worked in the independence of Korea. And when these people met in the prison, some people were too scared of the Japanese. But other people thought this was a chance to meet famous independence workers and talk about them, talk about their ideas. So they would talk about these ideas in their jail cells, but as I just showed you, there was these spying slits in those jails, and if they got caught during their discussion, they would be sent into these cell rooms. So if they got locked up in these cell rooms, this cell room is really tiny, you can see from this picture. And unlike this picture, this cell room was also really dark. There was no windows, no light bulbs, no nothing. So you get locked up in this small rectangle. You can't barely move. You can barely lie down with your legs stretched. And there was no place to put your urine and other things, so you had to do it all in this corner of a room. It's really dirty. And there was this famous almanac about an independence worker being locked up in here, and he was so alone, all alone in this dark room, and this started to drive him crazy. And so to get over this, he made friends with the bugs living in his own urine. And yeah, this almanac shows that how depressed all of this situation was in this prison itself. It was kind of like the worst prison. It was one of the worst prisons in Korea, and yeah, it was one of the worst prisons in Korea. The next picture I'm going to show you is of the execution room, but before I go on and explain the sad past of the execution room, I just wanted to give you a funny, strange story about these 2 trees you're seeing right now. These 2 trees look very different, but they were actually the same trees planted on the same day. And so there's kind of like these spooky rumors about why one tree is all dying and the other is growing nicely. Well, the theory is that one tree was planted inside the execution room, and because so many people died in here, the spirits clung to that tree for life, and they kind of kept on clinging even if they were dead, because they didn't realize that they were dead, and so that spirits stopped the growth of this tree. And the other tree was planted outside of the execution room, so he obviously didn't have all that kind of pain, and he could grow nicely. Yeah. So now the execution room. In this execution room, you can see chairs and you can see a stage. The prisoner would sit on the stage with his head inside the hoop, and on the other side of him, 3 janitors would question him about his beliefs and what he did wrong, and they would sentence, and normally they just sentenced him to death. So once they were sentenced, the floor underneath the jailer would go down, and so the chair would go down, but his head would be still stuck inside that hoop, so he would suffocate to death on the hoop. Sad story. So many people died in this execution room, like those famous independence workers, and I'm gonna give you an example of one of those famous independence workers right now. This is a picture of another jail room, but the peculiar thing about this jail room is that this jail was for women only, and one of the most famous independence workers in Korea happens to be a woman called Yu Kwan-sun. so she was actually only a student when she started doing this independence work, but she made flags and shouted the independence for Korea, and she eventually got locked up. She was given the chance to freedom, but she just needed to say the words, "I do not want the independence of Korea." But because of her strong beliefs, she just decided she thought that it would be better to be locked up in here than saying something against her beliefs, so she got locked up. And in memory of her, we changed the jail room. If you see here, you can see a lot of mirrors and pictures. These mirrors and pictures mean, these pictures are the pictures of people who died in behalf of Korea, and we left here to commemorate their deaths and ensure them that we are now free and we are on our free will. Yeah, so I think this is the end of my tour. I hope you have enjoyed my free tour, although it is very short and there are so many other things I want to tell you. I'm very sad that we couldn't meet in person, and I hope this virus gets over. So if you like my video, please like and subscribe. Thank you.